A retired traveler once whispered, "I didn't run out of destinations. I ran out of strength." That single sentence carries the kind of truth most people don't realize until it's too late. The biggest regrets in travel aren't about the money spent or the photos missed. They're about the moments not lived when the body was willing and the heart was open. Too many seniors wait for the right time, not knowing that the right time is always now. Every postponed trip, every dream vacation pushed aside for later, quietly turns into a story unfinished. And when later finally comes, it often brings bad knees, tight schedules, or lost confidence. But here's the hopeful twist: it's not too late to change that story. These are the 7 regrets no one talks about, the kind that can be avoided with one decision made today. This is Senior Travel Adventures, helping you explore smarter, safer, and freer after 60. Hit like so more seniors see this before they wait too long, and subscribe now to keep your passport and your spirit alive. Meet Lucinda Vale, 69 years old, a retired florist from a quiet town in Maine. For more than 4 decades, she arranged flowers for everyone else's milestones, weddings, graduations, anniversaries, even farewells. Her hands brought color to other people's stories, but she never took the time to add any to her own. Every morning she'd watch the travel shows on TV while trimming stems, whispering to herself, "Someday, I'll see those places." But someday kept slipping further away, buried beneath responsibilities, grandkids' birthdays, and the belief that her dreams could wait until the world slowed down. When her husband passed unexpectedly, Lucinda promised herself she wouldn't lose another season to hesitation. So at 69, she finally booked her first big adventure, a 10-day journey through the lavender fields of Provence. When she stepped off that plane, the air smelled like new beginnings. For the first time in years, she felt untethered, free, curious, alive. She took hundreds of photos, laughed with strangers in small cafes, even danced in a village square under soft yellow lights. It was everything she thought she had been waiting for. But when she returned home, something unexpected lingered, not satisfaction, but reflection. Behind every breathtaking memory was a quiet reminder of moments she had let slip by. The years she could have gone sooner. The fears that had held her back. The people she never invited along. Lucinda realized her journey wasn't just about seeing the world, it was about confronting the subtle ways she'd stopped living boldly. That beautiful trip didn't erase her regrets, it revealed them. It showed her how easy it is to get lost in caring for everyone else while forgetting that your own story deserves attention, too. And as she unpacked her suitcase, she saw more than souvenirs, she saw lessons. Because every single regret she carried began with one small, dangerous phrase, "I'll do it later." Regret 1. Postponing joy. Lucinda Vale once believed that waiting was wisdom, that patience was the mark of maturity. "It's not my time yet," she would whisper, tucking travel brochures into drawers like folded secrets. She thought putting off pleasure meant being responsible, that real adults delayed joy until everything else was settled. But life never truly settles. There was always one more duty, one more favor, one more reason to wait. And when the noise finally quieted, her strength had softened. Her steps were slower, her climbs shorter, her energy thinner. Waiting hadn't brought peace, it had quietly stolen her freedom. Later sounds harmless, even hopeful. But for Lucinda, later became a thief in disguise. She spent decades caring for her children, her husband, her flower shop, telling herself she'd see the world once things calmed down. When she finally stood before the tulip fields of Holland at 69, surrounded by color and scent, her knees ached, her breath shortened, and her heart carried the weight of time lost. She smiled through it, but inside she grieved the woman who once dreamed of dancing through those fields without hesitation, the woman who still lived inside her, waiting for permission that never came. Time doesn't move in circles, it moves in a straight, silent line. While we wait for the right moment, it quietly counts down, one missed sunrise at a time. Seniors are often told to be patient, but sometimes patience becomes permission for life to slip away unnoticed. Joy, unlike savings, doesn't grow with delay, it fades. Lucinda realized this truth standing under the Eiffel Tower, her hand trembling not from awe but from awareness. Joy has an expiration date, and hers had quietly been passing. There is no perfect time to travel. The right season, the right savings, the right company, those are illusions that keep dreams at a distance. Lucinda could have gone when her health was stronger, when her husband was alive, when her spirit was restless and wild. But she waited for alignment that never came. The truth she discovered too late was that life doesn't reward those who wait, it rewards those who go. Her regret wasn't about missing countries, it was about missing moments. The laughter of strangers on a night train through Italy. The scent of sea salt in Santorini. The sound of her own heartbeat when she first saw the Alps. These memories were never made, because she traded them for another year of waiting. The small joys, dancing barefoot at sunset, getting lost in a new city, tasting something unpronounceable, these aren't found in plans, they are born in motion. A half-prepared trip is always better than a perfectly postponed one. Because when you delay joy, you deny yourself the very thing you worked your whole life to earn, freedom. So, if you've been waiting for the right time, hear this, the right time is now. Book that flight, even if it's short. Visit that old friend, even if it's far. Choose joy before it chooses someone else. Don't let your dreams collect dust in drawers. What destination has been whispering to your soul for years? Type it below, not as a wish, but as a promise. Because the moment you do, someday stops being a word and becomes a departure date. Regret 2. Packing for others, not herself. When Eleanor Crisp finally boarded her long-awaited cruise to the Mediterranean, her suitcase looked more like a charity box than a collection of personal treasures. Scarves for her daughters. Souvenirs for the neighbors. Herbal teas for her bridge club. Not one item for herself, not even a dress she loved. "It's just how I am," she'd say with a polite smile. "I like to think of others." But beneath that smile was a quiet truth. Eleanor had spent so many years giving that she no longer remembered what it felt like to receive. Her suitcase told her story better than she ever could. Every folded blouse was chosen with someone else in mind. Every perfume bottle, every postcard, every trinket, all tokens of a woman who had made generosity her identity. But as the ship sailed past the shores of Greece, she realized that no one had packed for her. No one had thought of her comfort, her delight, her moment to shine. And worst of all, she hadn't either. On the third night of the cruise, there was a formal dinner. Eleanor watched other women her age twirl in silk and sparkle, their laughter echoing like music. When she opened her suitcase, she found only beige, practical shoes, wrinkle-proof pants, a cardigan just in case. She stared at the empty space where a red dress could have been. The kind she once wore in her 20s when she danced barefoot under the rain. But she had left that woman, and that confidence, at home. She sat quietly that evening, smiling for photos, toasting to others' joy, but inside she felt the ache of invisibility. She had given everyone a piece of herself, and now there was nothing left to unwrap. We often tell ourselves that selflessness is noble, and it is. But when taken too far, it becomes self-erasure. Traveling after 60 should be about rediscovery, not depletion. It's the season to reclaim space in your suitcase, and in your soul, for the things that make you feel alive. Eleanor learned this halfway through her trip, in a small Italian port. She wandered into a boutique and saw a silk scarf, turquoise, vibrant, nothing like her usual muted tones. The shopkeeper smiled, "For you?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. When she draped it around her neck, something changed. For the first time in years, she wasn't dressing to please or comfort anyone else. She was simply adorning herself with joy. That moment became her turning point. She started buying small things, not for others, but as mementos of her own awakening. A sun hat that made her feel daring. A bracelet that caught the light when she moved. A journal where she wrote not about chores or children, but her thoughts, her dreams, her rediscovered appetite for wonder. By the end of the cruise, her suitcase was lighter, not in weight, but in spirit. Gone were the unnecessary tokens of obligation. In their place were fragments of herself she had long neglected. The message is simple but vital. Your travels should be your reward, not another errand list. You've spent a lifetime carrying others. Now it's time to carry yourself. When you pack, choose something that makes you feel beautiful, or brave, or bold, even if no one else ever sees it. Because those small choices remind you that you are still here, still deserving, still radiant. So before your next journey, open your suitcase and ask, is there something in here that's just for me? If not, add one thing that sparks joy, a scent, a color, a song, a secret indulgence. Because life after 60 isn't about proving you still care for others. It's about remembering that you still matter too. Regret 3. Skipping the uncomfortable. Margaret June always believed in listening to her body. At 67, she'd earned the right to rest when tired, to sit when others stood. So, in Paris, when her tour group prepared to walk the cobbled lanes of Montmartre, she chose to stay behind at a cafe. My knees ache, she told herself, sipping her espresso and watching the others disappear up the hill. She comforted herself with the thought that she'd see it next time. But next time never came. A few days later in Florence, she did it again. The afternoon was warm, her feet sore. Her friends went to climb the Duomo. She waved them off from her hotel window, convincing herself that she preferred quiet reflection. I've seen enough, she whispered. Yet as she watched the golden light sink over the rooftops, she felt a hollow pang. She realized she wasn't resting, she was retreating. And the view she never saw began to haunt her more than the climb ever could. Margaret had always equated comfort with safety. It's what decades of responsibility had taught her: avoid risk, stay sensible, protect what remains. But travel, true travel, isn't always gentle. It stretches you, nudges you, sometimes even tests you. And yet, those are the moments that become the heartbeat of memory. When you look back at your journeys, you rarely recall the nights you rested early. You remember the hill you conquered, the rain that drenched you, the laughter that echoed when plans went awry. Weeks later, Margaret sat flipping through her travel photos. Every picture looked still, beautiful, but distant. There she was, smiling in front of landmarks, perfectly posed, perfectly safe. But something was missing: motion, adventure, the spark of spontaneity. She realized her photos were souvenirs of caution, not courage. The truth she wished she'd known then is simple but piercing. Discomfort fades, but regret lingers. The ache in your knees, the sting of fatigue, the uncertainty of stepping outside your comfort zone, they all pass. But the memory of what you didn't see, the sunset you skipped, the laughter you missed, those linger quietly, growing heavier with time. Travel after 60 isn't about moving fast, it's about moving fully. You don't need to climb every staircase or chase every landmark, but you do need to keep saying yes. Yes to life, yes to effort, yes to moments that ask a little more of you than feels easy. Take the slow path, not the safe one. Sit when you must, but stand when you can. Because every step you take, no matter how small, writes a line in the story you'll tell later. One morning in Lucerne, on her final trip, Margaret made a different choice. There was a trail leading to a lake she'd admired from her hotel balcony all week. It was steep, uneven, and far. Her friend said, "We can rest today." But something stirred in her, a whisper that said, "Not this time." She packed her walking stick, tightened her shoes, and went slowly, one patient step at a time. When she reached the lake, it wasn't grand or cinematic. It was quiet. The water shimmered like glass, mountains mirrored in its surface. She sat on a rock, her breath heavy but her heart light, and realized that the discomfort had already vanished. What remained was a feeling she hadn't tasted in years: pride. Sometimes the view you never saw is the one that haunts you most. But the view you fight for, even with trembling legs and tired lungs, becomes a sacred memory. So next time the road looks long, take it anyway. The body may protest, but the soul will thank you. Regret 4. Trusting strangers over instinct. Lucinda Vale prided herself on being kind. At 68, she had mastered the art of being agreeable, smiling through inconvenience, apologizing when others bumped into her, nodding politely even when her heart whispered, "This doesn't feel right." It had served her well in life, but on the road, that same kindness became her quiet undoing. It happened in Lisbon. She'd just landed after a long flight, tired but excited, suitcase rolling unevenly across the cobblestones. A taxi driver approached her before she reached the line. Cheerful, talkative, persuasive. "Shorter route," he promised, "same price." She hesitated for a moment, her gut twisting with a familiar unease. Something in his tone didn't sit right. But not wanting to seem rude, she smiled and got in. The shorter route turned into a winding detour, the meter spun like a clock gone mad, and by the time they arrived, she'd paid nearly double. She wasn't angry at the driver. She was angry at herself, for knowing better, for feeling the warning rise in her chest and ignoring it. That was the moment she realized that politeness, when misplaced, becomes a silent danger. Later that week, it happened again. A friendly man at the train station offered to help with her luggage. He chatted about his mother, his love for older travelers, his favorite pastries. She wanted to trust him. When he disappeared with her second bag, the one with her favorite scarf and medications, she felt more than loss, she felt foolish. "I should have known," she whispered. And she had. Lucinda's story isn't rare, it's just rarely told. Many seniors confuse being cautious with being cold, believing that trusting too little makes them cynical. But in truth, instinct is not suspicion, it's self-preservation honed by decades of experience. Age doesn't dull that instinct, it refines it. Every near miss, every odd encounter, every uneasy feeling has shaped it into something powerful and precise. Too often, seniors silence that voice inside out of fear of offending others. They don't want to appear paranoid, unkind, or judgmental. But safety doesn't apologize. The quiet signal in your chest, that flicker of hesitation, is your compass. Ignore it, and regret follows faster than danger. Lucinda began changing the way she traveled. She still smiled, still believed in kindness, but now, she paired it with confidence. She booked official taxis, checked reviews before trusting recommendations, and carried herself like someone who knew her worth. When strangers approached too eagerly, she didn't shrink back, she smiled softly and said, "No, thank you," without explanation. That simple phrase became her invisible shield. Her realization was liberating. Courage doesn't always mean saying yes. Sometimes, courage is saying no faster. It's walking away before pressure turns to trouble. It's trusting that your intuition, that subtle tightening in your chest, that faint whisper in your gut, is not fear, but wisdom. Months later in Marrakesh, Lucinda met another traveler who reminded her of her younger self, warm, trusting, eager to please. When a vendor tried to lead the woman into a private alley for a special discount, Lucinda gently stepped in. "Let's stay where the light is," she said with a wink. The vendor frowned, but she didn't flinch. They stayed in the open, safe, still smiling. That night, back in her hotel room, Lucinda reflected on how many times she'd mistaken politeness for peace. Now, she knew better. Politeness may open doors, but instinct keeps you from the wrong ones. If something feels off, it probably is. And saying no doesn't make you rude, it makes you wise. The world can be kind, but it can also test your boundaries. Trusting your gut doesn't close you off to adventure, it ensures you live to enjoy the next one. Regret 5. Neglecting health until it interfered. Lucinda Vale didn't think her joints would decide her itinerary, but they did. At 70, she imagined her biggest travel obstacles would be delayed flights or confusing maps, not the quiet rebellion of her own body. But on her long-awaited trip through Italy, her knees had other plans. Every cobblestone felt like a mountain. Every staircase seemed steeper than the last. What she'd dreamed of for decades, strolling through ancient ruins, wandering markets, became a daily calculation of pain versus pleasure. The discomfort didn't just steal her comfort, it stole her confidence. She found herself saying, "You go ahead, I'll wait here," more often than she liked. And with every skipped moment, something in her spirit dimmed. She wasn't just sitting out tours, she was sitting out joy. The cruel part? None of it was sudden. The signs had whispered for years: stiffness in the mornings, shortness of breath, fatigue that seemed harmless. She ignored them, believing travel itself would somehow reignite her energy. But adventure doesn't rebuild strength, it reveals its absence. Doctors now recommend conditioning before travel, not extreme training, just consistent, gentle preparation. Research shows that even light strength exercises, performed for a few weeks before a trip, can improve stamina by over 40%. Balance exercises reduce fall risk. Simple walks strengthen endurance. Yet most seniors prepare everything: luggage, documents, insurance, except their bodies. Lucinda admitted, I packed perfectly but forgot the one thing I'd actually need, myself. Her first major wake-up call came in Sanctay. Standing at the base of the scenic trail, she longed to climb to the cliffside view she'd seen on postcards. But her legs refused, trembling at the mere thought of the incline. Watching others make the ascent, she realized that health wasn't just about living longer, it was about living better. She promised herself that the next time she traveled, she'd treat her body like the passport it was, essential for every journey and worthy of care. It's a mistake many travelers over 60 make, assuming that preparation ends at booking. But just as you wouldn't take your car on a cross-country road trip without a tune-up, you shouldn't embark on an adventure without maintaining your body. Hydrate days before the flight. Stretch while waiting at the gate. Practice carrying your luggage for short distances to build grip strength. These tiny habits compound into freedom, the kind that lets you keep up with your own dreams. Lucinda began rebuilding slowly. A few minutes of light yoga each morning. Gentle squats while brushing her teeth. Evening walks around her block, pretending she was circling a piazza in Rome. And little by little, her energy returned, not just to her body, but to her spirit. When she finally revisited Italy 3 years later, she didn't skip the trails or settle for cafe views. She climbed, paused, breathed deeply, and smiled through the ache, not because it vanished, but because she'd earned it. Her story became a reminder that strength isn't youth, it's preparation. The older you get, the more your body demands partnership, not neglect. You don't have to train like an athlete, you just have to move like someone who plans to keep saying yes to life. So before your next adventure, do one small thing that honors your health. Walk a little farther, stretch a little longer, breathe a little deeper. You maintain your car before a road trip. Maintain your body before an adventure. Because the most beautiful view in the world means nothing if your body can't carry you there. Regret 6. Leaving no space for connection. When Lucinda Vale returned home from her 10th trip abroad, her photo albums looked perfect, breathtaking landscapes, charming hotels, glowing sunsets. But as she flipped through the pages, something felt hollow. Every picture was missing the same thing: people. I had all the photos, she whispered one night, but none with the strangers who made me smile. She realized she'd collected places, not connections. Lucinda had always prided herself on independence. She traveled solo because she loved freedom, no waiting for anyone, no compromises, no small talk. But somewhere along the way, that independence built invisible walls. She stayed polite but distant, nodding at fellow travelers, smiling at waiters, thanking guides, yet never truly engaging. She'd sit near laughter, not in it. And when her journeys ended, so did the warmth of those fleeting faces. The moment of reckoning came one quiet evening in Seville. She sat at an outdoor cafe, music floating through the warm air, surrounded by chatter and joy. At the next table, a group of seniors from Canada laughed over shared tapas, inviting glances her way. Lucinda smiled, raised her glass politely, and stayed silent. Hours later, she walked back to her hotel alone, realizing she couldn't recall the sound of another voice that entire day. That night, she cried, not from loneliness, but from awareness. She had traveled the world, yet often without truly being in it. Travel, she discovered, isn't about collecting destinations, it's about collecting moments of humanity. The kind where a stranger helps you find your way in a crowded station, or a local baker shares a story behind a pastry. Those are the memories that outlive luggage tags. And yet, so many seniors hold back out of fear of intrusion, of not being understood, of seeming awkward. But connection doesn't require perfection. It just needs presence. Lucinda began changing her approach. On her next trip to Ireland, she sat next to a woman on a bus and simply said, "That's a lovely scarf." A small sentence, a small risk, but it opened an entire conversation. The woman turned out to be a widowed traveler too. They shared tea, stories, laughter, and by the end of the trip, they were exchanging postcards. It wasn't planned, it was human. She realized the world is filled with travelers carrying the same invisible longing, to be seen, to share, to feel less alone for a moment. The best souvenirs aren't things, they're the faces that imprint themselves quietly on your heart. You forget the museum hours, but you remember the local child who waved at you from a balcony, or the waiter who taught you to pronounce a dish correctly, laughing all the way. Say hello more often. Sit next to someone new. Ask a question, even if your accent feels clumsy. The courage to connect is one of the last great adventures left. When you open yourself to conversation, you don't just fill your memory card, you fill your soul. Lucinda's albums look different now. Fewer perfect shots, more imperfect smiles. Fewer monuments, more moments. She said, "When I look through my pictures now, I don't just remember where I was, I remember who I was with." So as you plan your next trip, leave room in your itinerary for people. Not just sights. Because someday, when you look back, it won't be the places that make your eyes well up, it'll be the strangers who became stories. Have you ever met a stranger on a trip who changed your day? Tell that story below. Regret 7. Thinking travel ends after 70. Lucinda Vale once whispered to herself on a rainy morning in Madrid, "Maybe I'm too old for this." At 70, the idea of exploring new countries, walking through endless streets, or navigating foreign trains felt exhausting. She wondered if the thrill of discovery belonged only to the young, the ones with energy to spare, knees that obeyed, and lungs that didn't protest a single stare. Travel had become, in her mind, a young person's game. She had already missed the window, or so she thought. But then, in a small hostel in Porto, Portugal, she met a couple who challenged everything she believed. Howard was 82, his silver hair windblown and eyes twinkling. Marjorie, 79, moved with careful steps but an uncontainable spark. They were backpacking through Europe, slowly, deliberately, and joyfully. They weren't rushing to tick off landmarks or conquer sites. They were savoring every street corner, every cafe, every conversation. They weren't fast, but they were free. Watching them, Lucinda realized that travel wasn't about speed, stamina, or the number of countries visited. Travel was about curiosity, wonder, and courage, things age couldn't take away. That encounter became a turning point. Lucinda recognized that she had been limiting herself with invisible rules. After 65, after 70, after the loss of a spouse or the retirement of friends. She had assumed that age defined capability, that comfort defined wisdom, and that slowing down meant stopping. But Howard and Marjorie showed her that slowing down was not surrender, it was intentional living. Each step, even if slower, was still a step forward. Each new street, each unfamiliar word, each handshake with a stranger was proof that the world remained full of possibility. She began to rethink her own adventures. Instead of skipping trips because of limitations, she started planning routes that honored her pace, her energy, and her curiosity. She booked smaller trains, took guided walks, allowed herself long pauses in scenic squares, and embraced the rhythm of her own body. And in doing so, she discovered a freedom she had forgotten existed, freedom from self-imposed deadlines, from comparing herself to younger travelers, from imagining adventure had an age limit. Lucinda's transformation wasn't just physical, it was profoundly emotional. She realized that every day she chose to explore, she expanded not just her horizons, but her confidence and her spirit. Age did not define what she could do, it defined how deeply she could appreciate each experience. Sitting atop a hill overlooking the Douro River, feeling the sun warm her face, she finally understood the truth. You don't stop exploring when you age when you stop exploring. The message for seniors is clear, curiosity is timeless. Your body may be slower, your stamina may be less than it was in youth, but your capacity to be amazed, to learn, to connect, and to marvel is undiminished. Traveling after 70 is not about chasing the past or proving vitality, it's about embracing every remaining opportunity with intention, gratitude, and courage. Lucinda returned home with a renewed sense of possibility. Her luggage was lighter, but her heart was heavier, in the best way possible, with memories, friendships, and the knowledge that she was far from finished. Travel did not belong to the young, it belonged to the curious, the brave, and those willing to say yes even when the world whispers too late. So if you've been thinking, maybe I'm too old for this, hear Lucinda's story. The only limit is the one you accept. Step forward, take that trip, follow that curiosity, and remember, you don't stop exploring when you age. You age when you stop exploring. Lucinda came home with a heart full of lessons and a spirit that refused to be quieted. She emptied her old someday jar, the one that held decades of postponed plans, tickets never booked, dreams folded into waiting. With deliberate care, she started a new jar, labeled boldly, Now. Each note she tucked inside wasn't just a destination, it was a commitment to herself, a promise that she would chase experiences while she still could. She realized that regret doesn't come from growing older, it comes from staying still, letting fear, comfort, or hesitation decide for you. Life is measured not in years, but in moments seized. Her revelation was simple yet profound. Your best trip isn't behind you, it's waiting for you to believe you still deserve it. Adventure doesn't negotiate with calendars or birthdays, it rewards courage, curiosity, and the willingness to show up. Lucinda understood that the world remains open to those who act, and that each new journey is a chance to reclaim time previously surrendered to hesitation. She felt lighter, freer, and more alive than she had in decades, carrying with her not just memories of places, but the renewed conviction that life waits for no one. If Lucinda's story stirred something in you, hit like so other seniors can see this before they let another year slip by. Share it with someone who keeps saying, maybe next year, this might be the gentle push they need. And subscribe to Senior Travel Adventures, because next week's video reveals how seniors are scoring luxury upgrades for free without spending a dime. Remember, your passport might have an expiration date, but your wonder doesn't. Keep exploring, keep saying yes, and keep traveling before the clock does, because the moments you claim today are the memories that will sustain you tomorrow.